Hello there! Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And what a fabulous story this is. And certainly, poor Maggie had quite an encounter when she left the bus stop, and she was worried she was being followed by this teenager. But this teenager obviously had another agenda, but she was absolutely terrified of him. So let's continue with part 4 of our story, and let's continue with our story. Sophia Muldooney's account. But are you absolutely sure it was her? 100%, I mean. You believe this is my real father's wife, Maggie Barclay. Is that what you're saying, Carpenter? Yes, that's what I'm saying. I told you I've seen her before. Remember when I did a surveillance on her farmhouse last week? I was actually rather surprised to see she was enjoying a cup of coffee in the local town with a girlfriend of hers. I recognized her at once. I couldn't believe my luck. I thought I might be able to initiate a conversation with her, so I could tell her all about you. So I followed her. Initiate a conversation with her? Laughed Sophia. I'll believe that when I see it. I don't think you know how to talk to anyone, Carpenter. And I don't say that to be unkind, but it's true. Well, you're probably right about that, because I didn't speak to her. Not really. Scowled at her, maybe, but that's about it. You scowled at her? Well, that sounds like a promising start. She was actually very annoying looking down on me, she was. Well, maybe for good reason. Did you do something to offend her, Carpenter? I bet you did. I know what you're like. You haven't got the greatest of manners. Please don't tell me you were eating on the bus, because when you eat you can see everything that's going on in your mouth. Well, maybe that's true, but she didn't need to cast such a judgmental gaze all over me, as if I was a lower form of pond life. She's definitely very snooty, and got a high opinion of herself. Well, what exactly happened? Well, I discreetly followed her to the bus, didn't I? I got on the bus. It was pouring with rain. I had no money on my person, but thankfully the bus driver gave me a free ride. Maggie Barclay got off on a lonely, sequestered country road, perforated by large pools of muddy water everywhere, surrounded by thick groves of trees. I persuaded the driver to stop for me after he'd dropped Maggie off a little further up the road. For a while I thought I'd actually missed her, but thankfully I found a trail of her footprints in the mud that led directly to the woods. I suspect she was taking a shortcut through there, but I was unable to find her anywhere. She seemed to disappear into thin air. It was very baffling. I know that her farmhouse is through the woods. She must have got home before I even caught up with her. I suspect she's a very fast walker. But it was so muddy. I got mud over everything. I was hoping to catch up with her, to have some words with her. I wanted to tell her about you, who you are. On the bus I wanted to say something, but I completely lost my nerve. I mean, this is not an easy conversation to have, is it? And Maggie was giving me some really mean looks. She was probably pissed, 'cause as you say, I was eating on the bus, which is against the rules. Sophia frowned. She rolled her eyes in the back of her head. Typical of you, to be eating in the bus. No wonder she was frowning at you. I don't blame her. What if she knew you were following her, Carpenter? Did you stop to think about that for a moment when you got off the bus? I hope she didn't see you. You might have scared her half to death. And how do you think she's actually going to take it if you tell her that I'm her husband's daughter? Personally, I'm glad you didn't manage to catch up with her. Imagine a perfect stranger running up to you and telling you that their husband had a child with another woman. She doesn't know anything about me. She'd probably think you'd run away from a psychiatric unit. I'm not sure we're approaching this matter right. We need to be more delicate about this. Maggie might be very hurt about all this, I hope you appreciate. Well, what exactly did you want me to do? Said Carpenter, sounding aggrieved. You told me to watch the comings and goings of the Barclay family for you, to see what they were like, before you finally got in touch with them. And I did that for you, did I not? Anyway, I don't believe for a second that Maggie Barclay likes me. I think supercilious, self-important, and patronising are the words to describe her best. She's exactly like your mother was towards me, scowling at me on the bus, giving me dirty looks. So I scowled back at her. I knew when she looked at me so disapprovingly that I'd never get to talk to her. You're always putting your foot in it, aren't you, Carpenter? I still cannot believe you went to Jane Goodlington's apartment after Mum fell from the balcony railings to her death and told that woman that I recognised her brother from a photograph my mother had of him, that he sent her while he was in jail. I can't get over your doing that. I'm sorry, but I just can't. Sometimes you're so impulsive, Carpenter. You act before you think, like when you jumped onto the bus to follow Maggie Barclay. I mean, who does that? What's wrong with what I did? I think it was clever thinking of my part. Everything I do is for you, Sophia. Surely you know that. You said yourself you did not believe your mother's tragic death was an accident. You think this ex-con, by the name of Hugh Paris, who was writing to your mother from jail, was furious that she rejected him after she professed her undying love to him. You believe he discreetly pushed your mother from the balcony railings when she was doing her handstands. Given his sister Jane's flat is right next to your mother's flat, you know how easy it would have been for him to slide across to your mother's balcony. The design makes it extremely accessible. It would have been nothing for him to push her from the balcony railings to her death. It was very good I talked to Jane Goodlington about the matter. She did confirm her brother is the ex-con who has the name Hugh Paris. That was the man your mother was communicating with while she was in prison. Jane Goodlington's surname is the same as her late husband's, because she didn't want to go back to being called Paris. She said she hated that name. She did admit to me that her brother Hugh had a massive ego and would not have taken remotely kindly to being ditched by your mother while he was in prison. She had no idea that your mother had been writing to him. That was a huge shock for her. She was quite disquieted, actually, when I told her this. I could see she was beginning to think her brother might have had something to do with your mother's fortuitous passing. At first she believed, much like the police, that it was all a tragic accident. But there was a look in her eyes, Sophia, that told me instinctively that she was having big doubts. Yes, but why on earth did you tell her all this? Why did you tell her that I was suspicious of her brother? She's bound to tell you that we believe he's behind my mother's death. If that ex-con knows that I'm suspicious of him, he might try to take me out himself. Did you ever stop to think about that for a moment, Carpenter? These ex-cons don't think twice of killing people, you know, that get in their way. That man does not want to be going to prison again, and if he's accused of my mother's death, he'll be locked away for good, and the authorities will throw away the key, and he will want to make sure that that does not happen to him. You should have kept your mouth shut, Carpenter. Of course he won't come after you. You're being absolutely paranoid over nothing. The man's not completely stupid. The police believe it's an accident. What was it the police officer said to you? Tell me, what were his exact words? Well, he said if my mother was stupid enough to do handstands on the balcony railings, she was asking for an accident to happen, and he wasn't remotely surprised that she had fallen to her death. But he didn't know how agile my mother was. There you go. What's that supposed to mean, there you go, Carpenter? Let me tell you something for nothing. My mother's death was no accident. Hear that? No accident. She's been doing those handstands on balcony railings since she was knee-high to a grasshopper. If she flips over by accident, she holds herself onto the railings and pulls herself straight back up. It's no big deal to her. It's as natural as breathing. She would never do something that would impose a threat to her life. My mother wanted me to get in touch with my dad, to tell him that I'm his daughter. And instead of sneaking around, I think we should take the bull by the horns and pay the Barclays a visit, don't you? Are you going to come with me or not, Carpenter? I would really appreciate your support on this. Of course I'm going to come with you. I'm your boyfriend, aren't I? We'll do this together as a team. but I dare say Maggie Barclay will not be pleased to have a repeat encounter with me, based on the way she was glaring at me on the bus. Maggie Barclay's account. It was a Saturday morning. Both my children were spending the weekend away with friends, so it was me and my husband all to ourselves. It was good to have quality time to spend with Callum, without the kids being around. I knew I was going to make the most of this wonderful weekend, and I was looking extremely forward to it. My husband was going to take me out in the evening for a romantic meal somewhere. We were going to watch soppy movies together, go for long, relaxing walks in the countryside, and thoroughly enjoy every moment of being together, just the two of us. I climbed out of bed to smell the delicious aroma of bacon and eggs wafting around the house. The sizzling smell of bacon made my stomach begin to grumble with hunger. My husband was clearly making a romantic breakfast for the two of us, and I was touched by these lovely gestures from him. I couldn't remember the last time that Callum had actually made me breakfast, so I was really going to indulge myself this weekend, as my husband had promised to spoil me rotten. I hurriedly dressed into a pair of comfortable butterscotch-coloured chinos, which I quickly put on, and I paired with a white cotton blouse. I also slipped into a pair of comfortable sandals. I could tell that this was going to be a great weekend. That was until the ominous knock came at the front door. It may have been a Saturday morning, but we were not expecting any guests, and I frowned at the thought of an intrusion on the serenity of this peaceful morning. Who could possibly be calling on us at this time? "I'll go and get it," I called out to my husband, and when I casually meandered to the front door and opened it, who should be standing there but the seedy teenager from the bus stop that I had been convinced had been stalking me, and he was now standing next to a girl who looked like a goth, dressed in a black dress and combat boots. She was wearing black lipstick on her lips and had tattoos all over her arms and a piercing in her nose. "I know you," I said, pointing to the seedy teenager. "You were on the bus with me, weren't you? And then you followed me all the way into the woods as I was making my way home. What on earth do you want? Just so you know, my husband is here, so don't try any funny stuff on me." "Look here, I'm sorry I followed you, right? I didn't mean to scare you. If you must know, I was following you because I needed to have a chat with you." "You needed a chat?" I scoffed. "If you wanted to say something to me, you had plenty of opportunity on the bus, did you not? And I cannot think what you needed to talk to me about anyway. I doubt that we have anything in common." "Ma'am, you were scowling at me. You were unapproachable. You didn't exactly make it easy for me to talk to you. I kind of lost my nerve." "Well, can you blame me for not being very amenable towards you? You ate like an absolute pig on the bus, chewing with your mouth wide open so I could see everything that was going on. You spilt crumbs all over the place, on the floor, on the seat, everywhere. The place smelt of McDonald's cheeseburger. And there was a sign saying that you shouldn't eat or drink on the bus. You stunk the whole place out with your food. Furthermore, if that wasn't bad enough, I noticed you freeloaded a ride on the bus when it only cost $2.50. When stashed away very conveniently in your backpack, you had the latest smartphone and tablet. You buy cigarettes, yet you claim you can't afford to buy a bus ticket. I knew I'd heard everything. Then you occupy 2 seats, reserved for the disabled and the elderly. Are you surprised I scowled at you?" The young girl standing next to the teenage boy began to speak. There was something about her that reminded me of my daughter Julia. It was in her features and her mannerisms. "I'm very sorry about Carpenter. He's got very bad manners. I agree with you there. I don't blame you for scowling at him. I'd have probably done the same in the circumstances. I apologize for the fact he scared you half to death, following you off the bus. He can be such an idiot at times," she said, rolling her eyes in exasperation, as if she was talking about a belligerent little boy that had misbehaved. "Look, I'm here to see your husband, Callum Barclay. I've got business to discuss with him. It's very important." I looked at the young lady warily. She couldn't have been more than 16 years old, although she was very well spoken. What could she possibly want with my husband? How did she even know his name? Before I could tell the teenagers to go away, my husband entered the hall and stopped dead in his tracks as he stared at the two teenagers, in an expression of complete bemusement. He waved his hand in the air very dismissively and said, "I'm sorry. We're not doing any more sponsorships. I've done enough for the year." The young teenager that bore an uncanny resemblance to my daughter Julia stepped forward, pushing past me in the entrance hall, in a way that I found rather unsettling and presumptuous. Who the hell did she think she was? "You're Callum Barclay, are you not?" My husband looked taken aback. "Yes, that's me. How do you know my name?" "My name is Sophia Muldooney. I'm your daughter." My husband chuckled. "Oh, really? I don't think so, young lady. Nice try, though, I'll give you that. I don't know what stunt you're pulling, but I'm certainly not your father. I think I would know about it if I was." The young girl fiddled around with an envelope and presented it to my husband. "My mother's name was Alexa Muldooney. She died a few weeks back. She asked me to give this to you. You had an affair with my mother. At the time she was not seeing anyone, so there is no question that I am your daughter as far as she was concerned. But feel free to have a DNA test. I'm open to that. I won't take offence to it. In fact, I would positively encourage it. You made my mother pregnant. She never told you about me. She knew you were happily married, had a family. But she did tell me, if something untoward were to happen to her, that I must get in touch with you at once. She believed I needed a parent to financially and emotionally support me. Which is why I'm here today. I brought my boyfriend along with me. This is Carpenter. I'm currently staying at his mother's house." My husband's face paled. "Alexa Muldooney is dead?" he asked. He genuinely looked sad about this. "I'm very sorry for your loss, young lady. How did that happen?" "She fell off the balcony railings of her patio after doing handstands. The police believe it was an accident. I don't believe that for a second. I have my theories as to what happened to her. My mother never took unnecessary risks. She was a natural gymnast." "Yes, that's right. I do remember her doing handstands on her balcony railings," said my husband. "I did warn her how dangerous that was. But she never batted an eyelash doing those sequences. She was very nimble. I'll give her that." "What is going on here?" I asked my husband. "This girl can't possibly be your daughter. It's impossible. You haven't cheated on me, have you, Callum? I would know about it if you had. Do you know this girl's mother? You're talking about her as if you know her intimately. I don't understand any of this. Is there something you haven't told me, Callum? Is there something that I should know?" "Of course I haven't cheated on you, love. What do you take me for?" said my husband. "But remember when we separated for about 6 weeks? When our marriage went through a rocky patch? About 17 years ago or so? It's a long time ago now. You've probably almost forgotten. What I never told you was that I had a brief fling with another woman. I'm not proud of myself, love. Her name was Alexis Muldooney. I met her in a bar one night, and one thing led to another." "What? You never told me any of this. This is all news to me." "I was lonely, love. I was on my own. We saw each other for a few weeks, that's all. But it meant absolutely nothing. I can assure you of that. If anything, it showed me what a fool I was to have taken a break from our relationship in the first place. You, love, are all I've ever wanted. I told Alexa, while I liked her very much, I was still madly in love with my wife. And I'm very glad to say she respected my decision, and we parted amicably. I never heard a word from her again, and neither did I expect to. I had absolutely no idea that she became pregnant. No idea at all. I wish she would have told me this." "You never told me any of this, Callum," I said, feeling my heckles rise. "How could you? And now this girl here is claiming to be your long-lost daughter. You've got some serious explaining to do, Callum." Did you not hear a word I said, love? Don't you remember we agreed to split up, to go our separate ways for a few weeks or so, to decide where our marriage was going long term? Those were the loneliest, longest 6 weeks of my entire life. Alexa was there for me. She made it more bearable. But you know it's only ever been you that I've loved. We both agreed to the separation, did we not? After we'd gone through some disagreements together. Surely you remember all that? Yes, I remember. And I agreed to the separation. But I didn't agree to you charging off with some other woman and making babies with her. How could you do this to me, Callum? For your information, I never cheated on you during our separation. I never even considered it for a second. Love, I told you, I'm very sorry. I was lonely. Alexa, she was good company for me. But nothing more, love. I can promise you that. You're sorry, are you, Callum? That's rich coming from you. What you did was disgusting. You hear that? Disgusting. We had not agreed to end our relationship at the time. We agreed to a trial separation, and that's completely different. That did not include your cheating on me. You never told me what you did. You're treacherous, Callum. That's what you are. Do I even know you anymore? I wonder about that. I thought we promised there would never ever be any secrets between the two of us. Yet you betrayed my trust. At the very least, you should have been man enough to own up to what you did. What was the point, love? Said my husband, looking at me sheepishly, with a pained look in his eyes. I thought about telling you long and hard. Believe me, I did. As we agreed to having no secrets between us. But this was different. It was like a secret with a sharp blade that could easily hurt and slice through you. And I decided against telling you, as I knew you would be so upset about the whole thing. I thought, why would I want to break the heart of the woman I love most in the world? I mean, why do that? It makes no sense at all. It's like ripping a band-aid, pulling off a scab, and making the wound bleed all over again. And who does that if they've got any sense? I thought if you didn't know about it, it wouldn't hurt you. Even my mother advised me against telling you. She thought it was for the best. Your mother thought it was for the best, did she? You've got to be kidding me, Callum. You're telling me your mother knows all about this, all about your indiscretion? This is so incredibly embarrassing. I can't believe you actually had the nerve to tell her this. I wanted her advice. I didn't want to hurt you, love. It's a bit late for that, Callum, is it not? Isn't it funny how the treachery of our past has a funny way of sneaking up on us when we least expect it to? Let me tell you something, Callum. This young lady over here is not lying to you. She's definitely your daughter. When I saw her standing there in the doorway, I thought to myself she was a dead ringer for our Julia. And then she lets this cat out of the bag and claims to be your other daughter. This is crazy. Forgive me if I'm having trouble digesting all of this. Who's Julia? Asked the young woman, looking from me to my husband with an inquiring curiosity. Julia is my daughter, and you look astonishingly like her, doesn't she, Callum? I said, giving my husband a formidable glare. At least my husband had the decency to blush, which was jolly good of him, I suppose. Although at that precise moment I wondered if the man I'd married was good at all. How could he have not told me about the relationship he'd enjoyed with Alexa Muldooney? During our brief 6-week split, when our relationship was going through some turbulent times. I mean, my husband had met Alexa Muldooney at a bar. How unwholesome and tacky can you get? I'd have been very hurt that he'd done this to me behind my back. Of course I would. But I would have ultimately forgiven him in the circumstances. But learning about these objectionable goings-on, all these long years later, made me feel more and more affronted about my husband's obvious betrayal. It was debasing, degrading and mortifying to learn that my mother-in-law Eleanor knew all about my husband's dirty laundry. In fact, she had her hands right in it. Worse still, it was harder to learn that Callum had sired another child with another woman, who was now dead. I knew this young woman standing before me, or teenager if you like, in our entrance hall, with her long dark hair, pale skin and black lipstick, had to be Callum's daughter. The girl was definitely not lying about that, but boy did I wish she was. Her boyfriend Carpenter, the disagreeable, icky character from the bus, who looked as unwholesome and rough at the edges as ever, gave me a smug, self-satisfied look, as if he was thoroughly enjoying my disquiet. I glared at him, and he returned the favour, but there was a squalid, rank cockiness to his demeanour. I didn't like him one bit, and wondered why a nice girl like Sophia was hanging around with a loser like him. I knew if my daughter met Sophia, she'd wonder if she was meeting her double, even without a DNA confirmation, to prove whether Sophia was indeed my husband's daughter. I think he knew it was the truth, as did I. The one thing I will say for Sophia Muldooney is that she had more sensitivity than my husband, who stood there gawking at his daughter, as if seeing a ghost, and for a long time he seemed to have been lost for words, as he tried very hard to allow the truth of her startling revelations to finally sink in, rather like the oil on a wooden table, taking its time to be fully absorbed. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Barclay. This can't be easy for you to hear," said the teenager, "but I'm not going to apologize for being born, and whether you like it or not, I am your husband's daughter." I glared at the young woman rather unkindly. Her words were abrasive and scratchy, like sandpaper. I turned around to look at her fiercely. "Of course it's not easy to hear. How do you think I feel? That my husband was sleeping with your mother behind my back? And if that's not bad enough, I find out that he has a daughter with her that he never even knew about. What do you mean by coming here, young lady? Are you expecting to move in with us, become part of our family? Because if that's what you're thinking, forget about it. It's not going to happen," I said, stamping my foot belligerently. Carpenter began to smirk. His lips twitched, and a rather vindictive smile spread across his face. And then he spoke. "I know you're upset, Maggie Barclay, and I kind of feel sorry for you, even though you're a judgmental cow. Whether you like it or not, your husband has a responsibility to his daughter. He can't abandon her. She's got nothing, no one. Her mother is dead. Think about that for a moment. Her mother is gone. Whether you like it or not, your husband's name is on her birth certificate, and DNA tests will prove she is his daughter. So you have a duty of responsibility towards her. Sophia is only 16 years old, and you would probably never have known about her if Alexa Muldooney had not died in the dreadful way she did. But it is what it is." "This young man is absolutely right, love," said my husband, looking at me pleadingly. "I believe that Sophia Muldooney, this young lady over here, may indeed be my daughter. Of course, we will need to affirm this with the obvious DNA tests, but I can see she looks exactly like Julia. I have no reason to doubt her claims. Her timing would be dead on. I'm sorry, love, I really am, but I cannot possibly abandon my own daughter, if she is indeed my flesh and blood. She will need to move in with the family. You need to be reasonable, love. I'm begging you. I didn't ask for this to happen, did I? But it did, and we need to make the best of this situation. I realize if we hadn't had the trial separation, none of this would have happened. I was in a bad place at the time, very lonely. You know how it is." "No, I don't know how it is, Callum," I retorted. "Stop making excuses for yourself. It's pathetic. You're pathetic. Have you ever stopped to consider our children, Callum? Are you going to tell them about your infidelity? Or should I? Because this is a conversation I'm not looking forward to have. What are our kids going to think when they learn about what you did to me?" "There's no need to be like this, love. Look, I told you I'm not proud of myself." "Be like what?" I said. "I just cannot listen to any of this. You're trying to justify what happened. It makes me sick to my stomach. I feel ill about this, Callum, ill. I honestly don't know how to react to this news. It's very, very unsettling." Before Callum could respond to me, I took flight, like a bird eager to get away from a stalking cat. I ran out of the house with my purse tightly clutched in my hand, and realized with bitter disappointment that I couldn't get into my car to drive away, as I would normally have done. Why did it still have to be at the damn car dealership? I should never have bought a Japanese model, with parts that needed to be imported from Japan. The only option I had now was to take a quick shortcut through the woods and get to the back road to wait for a bus to come, to take me to town. I needed to get as far away from Callum as I could. I was surprised my husband didn't run after me, begging me to forgive him, professing his apologies, but he did none of the above. Maybe he thought better of it, and that it would be good for me to let off steam on my own, before I finally returned home, like the ever-dutiful wife that I was. I have never felt so aggrieved, so desperately betrayed in all my life. And to think my husband's mother knew about my husband's peccadillo, and was involved in this violation of our marital privacy, made me want to vomit up the contents of my stomach. I indignantly stomped through the trees, kicking up leaves furiously along the footpath, and thumping the ground, as if kicking it, I was indirectly inflicting a blow on my husband. I began to curse under my breath, saying some less than kind things about my husband, that I dare not repeat. My cursing turned into sobs, and then I was blinded by my tears, that began to shamelessly trail down my cheeks, like the globlets of rain on a glass pane. I walked through the trees and accidentally found myself on the wrong footpath, and this made me all the more upset. I couldn't walk any further. The idea of getting to the bus stop just seemed to become overwhelming. I reluctantly collapsed on the floor beneath a tree, and began to sob my heart out. I cried for a long time, until the tears dried up. My body couldn't produce any more. For a while I curled up under the tree, lying on some dry fallen leaves, resting my head on my purse, and then, against all the odds, I fell into a deep sleep. Now I had not anticipated that this would happen, but I guess I was so emotionally exhausted, so overwrought, so incredibly distressed, I would never normally be comfortable falling asleep in a wood grove all on my own, especially when the evening eventually beckoned. But these were extenuating circumstances that fell out of the boundaries of normality, for there had been nothing ordinary about this Saturday morning. I could only thank God that my children had not been privy to this startling, disconcerting news. I knew one thing for sure, was that I did not want to go home to face Callum. I was still so aggrieved with him. All I actually wanted to do was to throttle him. I couldn't believe the life I'd always known, our happy family of 4 to enjoy, was now threatened by this interloper, and this was because my own husband had cheated on me during the brief 6-week sabbatical in our relationship. I hasten to say knowing this hurt me deeply, as my husband Callum and I had always agreed never ever to keep secrets from each other. Was there anything else my husband was hiding from me? I could not help but wonder. I do not know where the day went to. It seemed to be dominated by its own set of galactic rules. The hours slipped away so fast that I don't know where they went to, nor did I actually care very much. The sun became like a remote stranger, finely setting, swaddling the sky in a golden shimmer. Darkness stole its way across the firmament in a velvety curtain that was now glowing with dazzling silver stars that danced around the pretty face of a pearly moon. But I witnessed none of these dramatic transformations, for I lay blindly oblivious in a fitful slumber under the tree. I heard the crickets and frogs singing their tuneful nightly choruses, along with 2 people engaging in chatter together in a rather strange language. The voices sounded unduly alarmed. Kotolo, kitaki, akila kwaki, motola sana tulusho. Amiga, inata, hokopolo, kikitaki, hoko. But I believed this was the entertainment that my dreams was obviously inviting. I stretched out my legs on the earthen floor, strewn with leaves and rambling foliage. I was expecting to feel my fine cotton sheets on me, but instead my environment felt rather earthy. Someone was tapping me on the cheeks, while they continued to engage in earnest conversation, Kitaki hamakila.
Omoki, sifatashi nakwa, habasilopo.
Pikitikati huku. I could hear this backwards and forwards chatter, and it was oddly comforting to me, like when you fall asleep with the radio on. Some might find that rather annoying, but never me. I felt blissfully comfortable in my dreamy state, enjoying the background noises. I didn't want to wake up. I felt cosily warm, as if I was covered in a duvet. I was to realize later I had in fact been covered with a blanket, completely made out of straw-like plant material, that had been crocheted together masterfully by a pair of proficient hands. The strange, seemingly far-away voices continued. Kiliki, akasi kwasha, mukulu.
Amina, ila tali kulopasha, ila tilani.
Pakikati, hopo. But everything felt so natural. All of a sudden, someone was speaking directly to me, rather like a nurse in an ambulance, telling you that you're in good hands and everything's going to be all right, but you've been involved in an accident. It was that kind of rather bizarre, paradoxical experience. The tapping was now on my shoulders. The pressure exerted on me was now harder than before. It almost had an urgency about it. Someone was definitely trying to wake me up. I opened my eyes rather reluctantly, because I was so enjoying the deliciousness of my sleep. I would have screamed in terror if I hadn't recognized the familiar friendly face of the Bigfoot staring down at me through her kind treacle-coloured eyes. I recognized her at once. This was the same kind Bigfoot that had rescued me from the tree branch rather recently and escorted me back to my home. I opened my eyes wider and sat up with a start. My attention was directed to not only the female Bigfoot, but to her male companion as well. They were standing side by side, looking heartily relieved to see that I was wide awake and healthy. They exchanged happy glances between themselves, as if they were saying, "Thank God she's going to be all right." I think they had stumbled across me by accident, lying on the forest floor, underneath the tall tree, in a fetal position, and were probably alarmed by my sorry state. They had no way of knowing the grief I'd been subjected to, or about the tears I'd cried, that in my exhaustion had finally driven me to sleep. I should have been thoroughly enjoying an evening meal with my husband in town by now, at our favourite restaurant, because he had promised to spoil me rotten today. But that was never going to happen. He was the last person I wished to see at this very point. The abrupt in-my-face memories of the morning, and the fortuitous, unfortunate appearance of Sophia Muldooney, accompanied by her seedy boyfriend Carpenter, made for a rather ugly, rude awakening, for I'd hoped to never see that young man ever again. I shuddered as I recalled it all, the warped details of my husband's infidelity, that were like rubbing salt into an open wound. It really stung. I knew, of course, that Callan was probably not worrying about me. Well, not at the moment anyway, even though it was dark. He was probably so caught up in the thoughts of the surprised daughter that had arrived on the scene of his life, like a parcel that he had never seen coming, that had been lost out at sea for over 16 years, and had now been recovered, like a pirate's treasure trove. He probably hadn't even given me a second's thought. How I wished that I'd managed to get the bus into town, and booked myself into a luxurious hotel for a couple of nights, to give me some space to think. Now I knew I had to go back home, with my tail between my legs, and be forced to face my husband, and talk about a subject I just did not want to discuss by any manner of means. The female was speaking to the Bigfoot. Pakitala, kolopasa,
Amina, ilata.
kita, ulapa. He seemed to nod in understanding. Then he turned around to walk away, giving me a shrug and a nod in farewell. He was so much bigger than she was, and I think the female was worried I might be rather intimidated by him. I suspect she had told him as much, so that was why he was leaving. But it really wasn't necessary. I could see he was a very gentle soul. The female spoke to me kindly. Kitaki, kutolopata. Are you all right? We got quite the shock seeing you lying there, under the tree. Your energy was almost as black as death, the colour of despair. Kutuli, pasikati, nolopani. And of course hopelessness as well. I thought you were dying. You gave us quite the fright. We were very, very concerned about you. Oh, me? I'm going to be absolutely fine, I said. It's just been, one of those rough days. I was touched to the quick that the female Bigfoot seemed to care so much about my welfare. She took my hand in hers, and it swallowed my hand up, like a tiny island that got lost in New York State somewhere. Her hands were that big. I guess I felt rather like a fragile doll in her company, but at the same time so protected and cared for. Kolitanika, sokosholo, you better come with me, she said. Kilaki casa, you need to get back home safely. Hopolapita. And my bet is you're not going to see terribly clearly without my guiding you. Kilatilasi, I'll lead the way. Tolopati, I see well in the dark. I noticed that the Bigfoot's nocturnal vision was excellent. Her eyes gave off a yellow eyeshine, very similar to that of a bear's. I was grateful for her guiding me so judiciously through the trees. As I can guarantee you, without her help, I don't think I could have returned home without stumbling awkwardly all over the place, despite the generous moonlight. I was rather befuddled to see that there were no lights on in my house. Everything was conspicuously dark, and that was incredibly unusual. Something felt strangely off. I was surprised the Bigfoot had walked me straight to the front door. She nodded at me, turned around, and glided away through the trees. I pulled out the house keys from my purse and rather reluctantly opened the door. It squeaked open. I staggered around in the hallway, putting on all the lights, wondering where on earth my husband had got to, for he was nowhere to be found. I hit pay dirt when I discovered my husband in the living room, sitting there on the couch, staring absent-mindedly into space. But when he saw me entering the room, he practically jumped out of his skin, and then, recognizing me, he ran towards me, throwing his arms around me. "Oh, thank God you're all right, love. Where the hell have you been? I thought you'd booked into a hotel for the night. Taken a bus to town, perhaps." "If you must know, I never actually reached the town. I failed to do so. But I'd rather not tell you about my less than pleasant afternoon. Some of it was all right, but then you probably wouldn't believe it anyway." "Fair enough. I'm very sorry, love. Sorry about absolutely everything. I don't know what to say. Everything came out of the woodwork this morning, and it wasn't the termites. It was a lot worse than that. I don't know how to apologize for everything. There should not have been any secrets between us. I should have told you all about Alexa Malduni. That was very foolish of me, not to tell you about it, and I'm very, very sorry. I'd rather we didn't discuss the matter any more, love. I just don't have the stomach for it right now. To cut a rather long story short, the Barclay family, my family that is, had to make all kinds of adjustments to welcome Sophia Malduni into the fold. In the beginning it was far from easy, with lots of hiccups along the way. As can be expected, the DNA tests confirmed that Sophia Malduni was indeed my husband's daughter. I was surprised that my children welcomed her without any expression of condemnation or judgment towards their father. On the contrary, they thought it was so cool to have another sister, and it would seem that Sophia and Julia became inseparable, as they were uncannily so alike. And for a while, I'm afraid to say, my own daughter dressed like a goth, with black hair and black lipstick, until she got tired of the look, when one day she realized having only black in her wardrobe, without any other colours, was dull and dreary to say the very least. I guess children are a lot more resilient than we actually give them credit for. We were to discover that the no-nonsense Jane Goodlington, who could lightly extract blood from a stone if given the chance, had boldly confronted her brother Hugh about Alexa Malduni's death. She had demanded a confession from him, when she discovered a muddy footprint of his on the outer ledge of her patio that could have only gotten there if someone had been clandestinely sliding from her balcony over to Alexa Malduni's balcony. Even the police had failed to notice the very obvious evidence. In the end, Hugh admitted to pushing Alexa Malduni over the balcony railings to her death, not expecting his sister Jane to grass on him. But he had underestimated her, for she presented the police with a taped confession from her brother, and he was subsequently taken into prison and charged with murder. The good news is he will never be getting out, but God only knows why Alexa Malduni did handstands on her patio railings in the first place. That was almost certainly asking for trouble, if you ask me. I mean, why would you go tempting fate? Just saying. It took a long while for me to warm to Sophia Malduni. I'm not going to lie about that, as after all she was the progeny of another woman. But in the last year or so, I began to love her. I can honestly say she's become a beloved member of our family. Sometimes I even forget that she's not my own daughter, and I couldn't imagine our lives without her in it. I do know my husband adores her, as do both of my children. I will say I'm very glad she and Julia abandoned the goth look, and she finally saw sense and broke up with that layabout carpenter. I never understood what she saw in that seedy boyfriend of hers, but I have to remind myself that I was a teenager once, and I also went through a rebellious stage like that. As for the Bigfoots, sometimes when I'm out in the woodgrove, I might see my friend in passing. She'll give me a nod, but no one else in our family sees her, and as for the male, well, he remains completely elusive. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Absolute fabulous story. I enjoyed that so very much. Until next time, goodbye and good night.